Chapter 4 of Phase 2, starting from page 11 in your notes. We're going to be talking about the Planning Act. Okay, so this is a framework for how land is orderly developed. This is where the government permits certain agencies to do the land uses, the roads, the schools, and the water supplies for the local cities. Now, once the master plan starts happening, the local planning gets involved to refine those plans, make adjustments, because not everything is going to be exactly the way the master plan was constructed. It's not going to follow it to the T. Now, at the city level or the municipal level, so in the city of Brampton, city of Mississauga, or city of Toronto, at that level, there's something called a Committee of Adjustments. Committee of Adjustments will grant minor variances, so those are minor changes, minor adjustments, and they will do consents on the zoning and also control any non-conforming uses. Okay, so one word that probably throws us off a little bit right now is non-conforming uses. What that means is, say, for example, you had a legal basement apartment, and it was legal up to the year of 1998. So it was legal. But in 2014, that's non-conforming. It doesn't conform with today's Planning Act. So that's what we mean by permitted non-conforming uses. So there might be some things that were permitted prior to today's year, and those were permitted then, but they're still permitted now because they're not starting now, but they were grandfathered from before. Kind of like having a cell phone plan that you had from 10 years ago and you can't get it today. You've grandfathered it over. It's the same kind of scenario. Okay? Now, at the provincial level, so on the level of Ontario now, speaking of the state, there's going to be something called Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Now, they're also concentrating on what the Ontario Municipal Board is implementing. They do the appeals and approvals of subdivisions and condominiums. So that means your state of Ontario is the one who's going to decide where the condominiums are being approved, where the subdivisions are being approved, and where appeals and approvals are also being applied as a state. Okay? So local, it says here that the book tells us local municipalities have some flexibilities and powers in the Planning Act issues. Okay? Now there's two tiers for the Planning Act issues for municipalities. So the upper tier is for the region, county, or district. So the region appeal that we're in right now, region of, Halton, according to the Greater Toronto cities that we're located in, they're responsible for the preparation and adapting and revising the official municipal plan that's already in place for them. And they can, of course, divide and develop the land as they see need to be accordingly, right? Because you've seen some changes in Mississauga, for example. You've seen that they've changed some of the main roads to accommodate some subway extensions and bus routes that have been expanded into the city that weren't there before. And they didn't plan for them before because we didn't need them, but now we do. So you'll see those kind of adjustments being done by the city level. The lower tier is the local municipality, and that's for zoning bylaws and other bylaws. So that's now we're coming down to that basement apartment scenario, or that accessory basement apartment we're talking about, the in-law suite. That's the one that we're talking about. If it becomes legal, or there's some adjustments, can we make it legal? And all of those issues will come up in the second tier. Very important to understand that the Ontario Municipal Board, the OMB, is basically similar to any court of law. It's like its own court that appeals for all the things to do with subdivisions, housing, condominiums, and those types of issues. So it's like a separated court that deals with only issues and appeals and approvals for these types of things. So you can imagine that like a traffic ticket court is separated for traffic tickets. This one is separated for subdivisions, approvals, appeals, and condominiums. Okay. Now, for real estate purposes, it says here that we want to understand that you'll see that in this chapter it talks about official plans, zoning bylaws, minor variances, subdivision plans, and land severances. And it says the OMB is involved in hearings and such diverse topics as development charges, compensation for expropriated land. That's where the government needs to take land from you to build a highway or something that's for public use. And applications for gravel pit licenses, too, are done with them as well. Now, the official plan is a planning document approved by provincial level, so it's Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. It's connected to the Planning Act. It's normally extended for a use of 15 years. So this is, of course, there's always changes in trends and influences in the cities that we live in, and because of that, these plans will be 15 years approximately of use, and then, of course, they can be altered. And this obviously applies to commercial and residential developments. Also includes infrastructure like roads, sewers, and water mains as well, because the community growth is forecasted in the foreseeable future based on these items. Okay, so Committee of Adjustment, they're responsible for minor variances in keeping planning principles and zoning bylaws pretty much close to what they should be. The Municipal Council or Planning Authority normally has the authority under the Planning Act to grant consents regarding land severance. Okay, so you know Committee of Adjustments does your severances, your land severance. They can also grant minor variances. Control any alterations or modifications to non-conforming uses, which we've covered. And again, it repeats it's empowered to grant severances again. Okay, so minor variance is for planning purposes. It's described as small or insignificant variation concerning a particular property in relation to the bylaws or force within a municipality. Okay. Non-conforming use again is, let's take the basement apartment. It doesn't conform in today's time. It could have been approved up till 1996 in most cities and most municipalities. So you can consider it as something that is grandfathered. And continuing on. So land severances again describes, you make an application to the local Committee of Adjustments. They will approve it and grant the consent. It typically is 1, 2, 3 parts. So maximum of 3 parts or less. Subdivision, you typically want 4 or more parts. First, you make a draft. Draft plan is like a dummy plan. You take it through all the refinements, and then you do the amendments. And once those are done, you can produce a final plan for approval for the subdivision. Once it becomes accepted, you've got a registered plan of a subdivision. That diagram right there describes it very clearly, very well. So that takes you to the end of page 12. Please study and follow this diagram on page 13 at the top. This will show you exactly the same structure of language that we've just gone over to reiterate and reconfirm and help you study. And you'll see the zoning bylaws in chapter 5 when we move into chapter 5 next.